isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself and choosing the happiness you truly deserve. If anyone has ever told you that your college graduation would be the most unforgettable moment of your life, I'm convinced they've never had to stand alone on stage, scanning a sea of strangers for their family, only to find every reserved seat for their loved ones completely empty. My name is Emma Carter. I'm 22 years old and I just graduated from the University of Georgia in Athens. But on the day I put on that bright red gown and held my honors diploma in my hands, my parents were back home in Macon, busy throwing a big backyard BBQ for my sister Chloe. The same sister who dropped out of college last year to chase her dream of becoming a country singer. A dream nobody knows if she'll ever reach. It feels like my entire life I've always been a faint shadow, trailing behind Chloe's triumphs and failures, while she's been the golden child, always cherished, always forgiven, no matter what mistakes she made, while I quietly learned to fend for myself at every turn. Have you ever felt like, at the most important moment of your life, your family chose someone else instead of you? Tell me where you're watching from, hit like, and subscribe if your family has ever made you feel invisible, just like me. My family lives in Macon, a small city in central Georgia where everyone knows each other and every summer is filled with the smell of barbecue and laughter echoing from the backyards of old stately homes. To outsiders, the Carter family always looked like the picture-perfect household that neighbors admired. My dad proudly ran a small repair shop he had opened over 20 years ago, and my mom was a devoted woman who took care of every family meal and was an active member of the local church group. But behind closed doors, the world Chloe and I lived in couldn't have been more different. My sister Chloe was always the star, not just in my parents' eyes, but she seemed to be the center of the entire Carter family universe. Ever since we were kids, Chloe was called the golden girl by our parents. Beautiful, talented, always winning the biggest prizes at competitions. Meanwhile, I was just the skinny little sister with light brown hair, always dusted in flour from my part-time job at the bakery. Remembered once, when my class won second place in a science fair, my parents just shrugged and reminded me that Chloe had won first place in the entire state when she was younger, as if every effort I made was just a pale imitation of hers. Every family dinner revolved around Chloe. Stories about her singing at the spring festival, stories about the boys who noticed her, stories about how she almost landed a full-ride scholarship to Alabama. To my parents, every stumble Chloe made was simply a challenge to help her grow, while every achievement of mine was treated as nothing special, barely worth mentioning. When Chloe said she wanted to be a country singer, my parents immediately spent money to send her to Nashville for singing lessons, booked her studio auditions, and were ready to pay whatever it took, as long as she could chase her dream. Meanwhile, I had to start fending for myself from 10th grade, taking on all kinds of odd jobs, from serving coffee in the early morning to cleaning out stockrooms at the supermarket, just to save every dollar I could for textbooks each semester. Sometimes I felt like a guest in my own home, quietly coming and going, taking care of everything myself, living under the same roof but never really belonging. Many nights I lay awake wondering if it was because I wasn't as talented as Chloe, not as dazzling, that my parents poured all their love, sympathy, and hope into her instead of me. Still, I tried not to be jealous. I just kept working, studying, and secretly hoped that one day, maybe my parents would realize that I deserved to be proud of too. The day I got my acceptance letter from the University of Georgia, I cried alone in the small room I rented, where I worked every night just to help pay for my textbooks. When I called to tell my parents the news, they barely reacted. Instead, they asked how I planned to pay for college myself. "Your sister Chloe needs money for her dream," they said. "We don't have extra, so you need to think carefully," but giving up was never an option for me. I found every possible way to earn more when I started college. Morning shifts at the donut shop beginning at 5:30, IM evening shifts ending after 10 p.m. Some nights I'd get back to my little apartment completely exhausted, but still had to squeeze in homework and studying, terrified that if I missed a single step, everything would slip away. Every winter I'd sit alone by the window, looking out at the golden lights of Athens, promising myself I'd never become a burden to anyone, not even my own family. I still remember so clearly the Thanksgivings and Christmases when my friends all went home to gather with their families. I'd get a hurried phone call from my mom telling me they'd be having a party for Chloe because, "Your sister just got back from Nashville, I hope you understand." Meanwhile, I'd buy myself a tiny cake, stick in a candle, and celebrate making it through another tough semester all on my own. On those days, I always told myself to be strong, because I didn't want anyone to see me as weak, or give anyone a reason to pity or look down on me. Every little success I achieved, from my first day in advanced calculus to being accepted into the summer research program, was the result of sleepless nights and silent tears. I once sent my parents an email inviting them to my research presentation, only to get a brief reply, "Congratulations. By the way, Chloe is working on songwriting now too. Hope she'll succeed soon." There were moments I wished I could fail and still be hugged, comforted, the way my sister was. But over time, I learned to rely on myself. I learned to turn every rejection and every moment of being overlooked into fuel to keep going forward. Then, the most anticipated day of my youth finally arrived. I prepared for my upcoming graduation with so much hope and anticipation. It wasn't just an academic milestone, it was proof of every quiet effort I'd made over the past 4 years. I saved every tip I earned to buy a new dress, excitedly made plans to send out invitations to my parents and my grandparents in Savannah, hoping that, just once in my life, they'd be proud of me. In the days leading up to the ceremony, I tried to decorate my tiny apartment, putting up photos and keepsakes on the wall, imagining the scene where my family would gather, my parents holding my hand on campus, taking pictures together under the famous old oak trees at the University of Georgia. I even wrote out a thank you card, planning to read it aloud in front of them. "Thank you for raising me to be strong and to overcome hardship." I truly believed that if I tried hard enough, things would eventually change. But once again, like so many times before, I faced the risk of being forgotten by my own family, a truth I never dared to say out loud, but deep down, I was always longing for the day I would finally be seen. A week before graduation, I called home to make sure my parents would be able to come to Athens. I was so nervous that I had to rehearse what I'd say over and over, terrified that even one careless word might make me cry. When my mom picked up, I gently reminded her about the invitation I'd sent at the beginning of the month and asked if they'd received it, and whether they'd be coming with me. My mom replied hurriedly, saying the shop was busy lately. They had to check on the machines and some new deliveries, so she wasn't sure if they could make it. I pleaded, reminding her that graduation only happens once in a lifetime and it's just over an hour and a half's drive, but she avoided the question, saying she'd have to discuss it with my dad and would let me know later. During the call, I could hear Chloe laughing in the background, talking about preparing a cheer-up party at home with her friends, making my small apartment feel even emptier and lonelier. In the following days, Chloe wouldn't stop posting Instagram stories about how mom was getting a huge BBQ ready to cheer her up, since that day was supposed to be her own graduation at Alabama if she hadn't dropped out. Under each picture, Chloe's friends commented about how brave and strong she was for chasing her dreams, and my mom excitedly replied, "Family is always here for you. You deserve all the love." Staring at my phone, my heart ached. All the things I wished I could receive were so easily given to my sister, who had just dropped out of college and come home without a care for what the future might hold. I couldn't bear that feeling anymore, so I called my dad directly. I asked him outright, "Are you and Mom coming to my graduation?" He hesitated and said the shop was really busy this year, and besides, Chloe needed the family to support her after coming back from Nashville. I couldn't hold back anymore, my voice broke. "But what about me? Do you ever think about me? On my graduation day you're choosing to stay home and throw a party for Chloe? Is that fair?" My dad sighed and said, "Chloe's been through a lot of failures. She needs the family's support. You're always so strong, so independent, I'm sure you'll understand." Hearing that, I felt both angry and hurt, realizing that, no matter how hard I tried, my parents would always see me as the one who naturally overcame difficulties, while every failure of Chloe's was a reason for the family to come together and protect. That night, I sat alone in the dark, tears streaming down my face, with nobody to notice or ask if I was okay. Looking at the old family photos on my desk, I realized I'd always been an outsider, even though deep down, I still wanted so desperately to hold on to some small place in that home. The laughter, the well-wishes, the gifts, the parties, all of it was for Chloe, while I was left with empty promises, excuses about being busy. and the sharpest sense of exclusion I'd ever felt. Sometimes I wondered if anyone had ever truly seen me, beyond the shadow of the girl who can take care of herself, surviving through self-reliance, never needing anyone to worry about her. I had never felt so alone and hurt in my entire life. But at the same time, I had never wanted so much to finally speak up for myself. Graduation day arrived on a gentle May morning. The city of Athens was bursting with the red of hundreds of gowns, students gathering across campus, laughing and posing for photos under the deep shade of the ancient oaks. I organized everything by myself, from renting the cap and gown, preparing flowers for my advisor, to booking a photo session with my close friends. My heart was restless, holding on to a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, my parents would show up at the last minute, that someone might call my name out of the crowd. When the loudspeakers blared, row after row of students made their way toward the stage. I slipped through the sea of people, eyes searching desperately for a familiar face in the family section. But for the entire ceremony, that row of seats remained just a long, empty stretch. The place with the Carter family sign still untouched, not a single person showing up. My friends were wrapped in hugs from parents, siblings, even grandparents, showered with flowers and taking family photos, while I just smiled quietly, hiding my sadness behind lipstick in the dress I'd saved for months to buy. The cheers and happy faces all around only made my loneliness grow until I realized that out of thousands, I was the most lost person in the crowd. After the ceremony, as my friends invited each other out to celebrate, I quietly went back to my tiny apartment on the edge of Athens. The red gown was folded carefully on a chair, the bouquet from my advisor still fresh on the table, but the room was eerily silent. I picked up my phone, planning to call home and share even just a simple congratulations. But the very first notification that popped up was a series of public photos Chloe had posted on Facebook. The backyard filled with music, a BBQ table piled high with grilled meat, glittering balloons, and in the center was Chloe, radiant in a new floral dress, being embraced by my parents, surrounded by friends. My mom beamed beside her, holding the mic and announcing, "Chloe has always been the greatest pride of the Carter family. Today, let's all support her to keep chasing her dream." All the comments below were congratulating Chloe for overcoming hardships, for being brave and never giving up, when in reality she was the one who had given up on everything. My hands shook as I held my phone, tears falling down my cheeks unchecked. Some friends messaged to congratulate me on graduating, asking where my family was and why they weren't in any of my photos. Even my advisor sent a private message, "Emma, you've done so well, I'm proud of you. Remember, your worth doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition." But in that moment, those words only made me feel emptier and smaller. A tidal wave of betrayal surged through me. My parents hadn't just missed the most important day of my life. They had openly thrown a party for the one who had quit everything, justifying their favoritism with the excuse that she needed encouragement. Every photo from that barbecue, every laugh from the other side of the screen, only pressed deeper into the loneliness and injustice I'd tried so hard to ignore for so long. I sat on the floor of my silent room, the scent of morning sunlight still clinging to my graduation gown. Every expectation and faint hope that my parents would one day be proud of me shattered without mercy. It wasn't just a ceremony that had been missed. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I no longer wanted to wait for anyone to fill the emptiness in my heart. From the moment I stepped into that empty room, everything seemed to slow down around me, as if the world outside was still celebrating while I was left behind, alone with thoughts and pain I couldn't put into words. I didn't want to eat, didn't want to turn on the lights. I just curled up in the dark, listening to the wind slipping through the cracks in the door, feeling the room grow colder and colder, even though May in Athens was never truly chilly. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of that backyard BBQ would reappear, the place where I should have been, the one celebrated today. All those years of effort and hard work, and yet I was still nothing but a faint shadow in my own family. The words my parents had said echoed in my head. "Chloe needs encouragement more than you do. You always know how to take care of yourself. You don't need anyone's help. Try to understand your sister. She's much more fragile than you." Every phrase, every word felt like a knife, cutting into the pride I had painstakingly built throughout my youth. Maybe what hurt most wasn't their absence, but the realization that I'd never truly belonged there, no matter how hard I tried to become the child they wanted. I lay on my back staring at the ceiling, remembering all those silent birthdays, every Thanksgiving with nothing but a cup of instant noodles, every promise of, "we'll make it up to you next year," that never came true. Those memories now rushed back, overwhelming me with disappointment and helplessness. There was a moment when I wondered if it was wrong to want love, to crave recognition, to wish to be part of the family rather than just someone on the sidelines watching everything unfold. In that darkness, I decided to call my grandparents in Savannah, the only people in the family I believed would listen without judgment. When I heard my grandfather's deep, gentle voice on the other end, I almost broke down and told him everything I had kept bottled up for so long, the feeling of being abandoned, being overlooked, every effort that never got noticed, and the unfairness of how every one of Chloe's mistakes was shielded by our parents while nobody ever once sincerely asked if I was okay. I told him about my graduation, about the pain of seeing those BBQ photos, each one for a full minute. He didn't say anything, just quietly listened to me sob, and that silence comforted me more than any encouraging words ever could. My grandmother then took the phone, her voice trembling as she asked if I'd eaten, if anyone was with me, and assured me that she'd always be there for me whenever I needed. Even after I hung up, I couldn't quite believe I'd just revealed my deepest feelings to my grandparents. I felt lighter, but I also realized that I was utterly drained of faith in my parents and Chloe. I didn't want to wait anymore. I didn't want to see my name left out of the most important moments ever again. That night, I blocked my family's numbers, turned off social media notifications, and told myself I would never let anyone have the power to make me feel small again. It was painful, but for the first time in my life, I started to think about freeing myself from the endless cycle of old wounds. Even if I knew the days ahead wouldn't be easy. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with missed calls from unknown numbers I didn't want to answer, a gut feeling telling me something unexpected had happened. By late afternoon, as I was checking my school emails, I saw a short message from my grandfather. "Emma, don't worry, everything will be all right. Your grandparents will always love you." It was encouragement I'd never heard from my own parents. I read it again and again, tears quietly falling, grateful, but tinged with a small doubt. Was there really anyone left in this world who would stand by me? Just a few hours later, I got a message from my childhood neighbor in Macon. "Emma, did something just happen at your house? Your grandparents drove over this morning. It looked serious." My heart pounded, half afraid, half hopeful. I quickly checked Facebook and saw vague status updates from relatives about an unprecedented confrontation at my home. Even Chloe was unusually silent. All I could do was sit and wait, hoping the truth would finally come to light. That evening, my grandfather called me back, his voice steady and warm, like the old oak tree in the backyard. He told me that he and my grandmother had driven 4 hours from Savannah to Macon that morning, arriving at my house without warning. He explained that, for years, they had been sending money to my parents every month, hoping Chloe would get back on her feet after her setbacks. But they never imagined it was all just an excuse to hide the truth. That Chloe never actually wanted to be independent, and my parents had come to take their kindness for granted, as if it were their right. For the first time in his life, my grandfather said he was ashamed of how my parents had treated me, of the injustice they had let fester, that they had lost the only daughter who truly knew how to stand on her own 2 feet. He didn't stop there. He openly called Chloe lazy and unambitious right in front of the entire family, tearing apart every excuse about her struggles and her need for time to recover. My grandparents declared that, from that day on, they would completely stop sending money to my parents and Chloe. Instead, in front of everyone, they announced that the money would now go directly to my account every month, to pay off my student loans, so I wouldn't have to break my back at the bakery anymore, so I could live my youth and reach my potential without the fear of being left behind. My grandfather said, "You are the true pride of the Carter family, Emma. We're sorry we let you suffer for so long." Listening to him recount everything, I was almost numb with emotion. A childhood spent overlooked, a youth spent struggling to survive, all soothed by a few words of fairness and decisive action. My grandfather told me that from this moment forward, I no longer had to bow my head waiting for love from those who only used their fanny status for their own gain, that my grandparents would always have my back, supporting any choice I made for their. When I hung up, my hands were still shaking, my heart filled with a strange feeling. Part relief, part the sensation of having just broken free from the thick fog that had blanketed my heart for years. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in this world anymore. A fresh energy seeped into every corner of my life, urging me to get up, wipe away my tears, and face the future with gratitude and a determination never to let anyone trample my worth again. Just a few days after that confrontation, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with missed calls and messages from my parents and Chloe. Numbers I'd blocked in a moment of weakness now showing up through new accounts, emails, even mutual friends. At first, their words sounded pleading. "Emma, let us explain. It's not what you think, we're family." But I no longer believed in a family that existed only in name. In a heartbeat, their apologies turned into complaints and blame. "How could you talk to your grandparents like that? You've embarrassed the whole family. Chloe is devastated because of you." But I was strangely calm. After all those years of bottling things up, every accusation had turned into a protective wall around me. A few days later, I heard my parents had hurriedly driven up to Athens, showing up at my dorm unexpectedly, bringing a big gift basket and their most regretful faces. They caught me after my internship, forced smiles, asking about my life, complimenting how beautiful and grown up I'd become. But when I looked in their eyes, all I saw was restlessness, the anxious look of someone who had lost something that was never really theirs. I knew exactly what this trip was for, not to truly apologize, but to make me soften up, to tell my grandparents about their change so that the money might flow back to them and Chloe just like it always had. I listened, smiled politely, but I wouldn't let myself fall into that old trap again. When they handed me the gift box, I thanked them, gentle but firm, and said, "You don't need to do anything for me anymore. From now on, I'll take responsibility for my own life." I saw a flash of disappointment in their eyes. A harsh truth finally rejected outright by the daughter who had always been so obedient. Chloe was different. After the shock of losing her allowance, the sister I had once tried so hard to admire turned to open attacks on social media. Chloe's Instagram stories were flooded with accusations that I was selfish, a traitor to my own blood, that I only cared about money and abandoned my sister when she needed me most. Sadly, there were plenty of her friends jumping in, trying to paint me as the villain in our family story. But this time, I didn't feel hurt anymore. I was far too used to being misunderstood, too used to being blamed for everyone else's failures. What I didn't expect was that one day, in the comment thread under Chloe's post, a stranger spoke up. It was a former member of the country band Chloe had joined in Nashville. This person spelled everything out. Chloe had never had to pay her own college tuition like she always bragged. Every single expense had been covered by the Carter parents from start to finish, and they even attached receipts as proof. That information spread quickly among Chloe's friends, who had always admired her. Suddenly, they fell silent or quietly deleted their comments. For the first time, the lies weren't protected anymore. The spotlight turned off for Chloe, and the real story was laid bare for everyone to see. In the midst of all that noise, I chose not to defend myself, not to make excuses. I spent time talking with my grandparents and with friends who genuinely understood and appreciated me, receiving more encouragement and trust than I'd ever known. I decided to delete and block all contact from my parents and Chloe, leaving no channel for them to intrude into the new world I was building with my own hands. Painful, yes, but it was freedom. And looking back, I know that not everyone has the courage to sever toxic ties, to step out of the cage called family duty and start living true to themselves. But I did it. I was no longer the obedient daughter silently enduring every injustice. Now, I was the one in control, the one who defined my own worth and my future, no longer needing anyone else to speak on my behalf. The days that followed moved to a completely new rhythm, a peace I'd once thought I'd never reach. Every morning in Athens, I woke up without the old anxiety of being forgotten or the pressure to shrink myself to fit impossible expectations. My tiny room was the same, but somehow felt brighter, with sunlight streaming through the window, glinting off photos I'd taken with friends on graduation day. Moments where I saw my own genuine smile, not the strained one I used to wear to hide old sorrow. I began my internship at a tech startup right in downtown Athens, a new environment, full of challenges, but overflowing with opportunity. No longer forced to juggle 2 or 3 jobs just to cover tuition, I used the support my grandparents sent each month to pay down student loans and invest in things I truly believed in. In the evenings, I cooked for myself, did yoga on a mat in my living room, and read books I'd never let myself buy before, always too worried about spending money. New friends came over, bringing fresh bread and laughter. Together we made plans for weekend trips around Georgia. Little things I'd once thought were luxuries, back when I could only run forward, always struggling to keep up. My grandparents still call me regularly, asking about my work, sharing funny stories from their youth. They never bring up the past, instead they quietly encourage me, sending trust and pride my way. For the first time in my life, I've experienced a kind of unconditional family bond, not because I made someone proud, not because I was the one who knew how to take care of herself, but simply because I was myself. Because I am Emma, the one who dared to step through loss and rebuild a new world with her own hands. I also received countless messages from strangers, young people, others who had known what it felt like to be overlooked by their families, who had struggled in silence just to be seen and loved. They told me my story gave them the courage to stand up, to set boundaries, to speak out, to dream of a future no longer ruled by fear. I read every line, every word, feeling a deep sense of connection that old wounds had once hidden from me. I've come to understand that not everyone has a true home. Not everyone receives the recognition they deserve from the place that's supposed to be their safest haven. But it was exactly those absences that gave me the courage to create a new family of my own. My grandparents, my friends, and a community of people who know how to share and heal together. I once thought I was just a shadow in someone else's story. But now, I realize I can shine in my own way. If you're watching this video, if you've ever felt excluded or hurt by the people you loved most, I want you to know you're not alone. Don't let silence or constant comparisons make you question your own worth. Stand up, seek out a community, a true family that loves and values you, even if you have to start over from scratch. It's never too late. I no longer blame my parents or Chloe, because I've learned that everyone can only give what they understand about love. I have forgiven them, but I'll never return to that old cage. I choose freedom. I choose to build my future in my own way. My value no longer depends on anyone's approval but my own. I am Emma Carter, and I am proud of my journey, of my scars, and of every time I've stood up with pride. If you've ever been in a situation like mine, don't hesitate to share your story in the comments. Who knows? Your story might be the spark someone else out there needs for a new ray of hope. Please like, subscribe, and join me on this journey because we all deserve a real family, even if we have to build it ourselves from the ground up. Thank you for listening, and thank you for giving me the chance to be myself.
My sister